Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kelly Simon. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the ACLU of Oregon's Interim Legal Director and also your host tonight. Thank you for joining us today for our Pride webinar. We want to inform everyone that this webinar is going to be recorded so that we can share it with members and supporters who are not able to attend this evening. And before we introduce the panelists and dive into today's conversation, I want to start off by thanking our ASL interpreters, L'Oreal Aviles and Brandon Heaps. If you prefer to have the interpreter's window large and the rest of the participants' windows much smaller, you can use the pin feature to keep one window larger than the rest. Brandon and L'Oreal will share interpreting tonight, so you will need to switch your pin speaker as they switch. We also have captioning tonight provided by Heather Rutler from LNS Captioning. To turn on captions, click on the closed caption at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitle. I invite you to ask questions throughout the event. If you want to ask a question, please type your question into the Q&A box and not the chat box. The Q&A box is located at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a box with the letter Q on it. If anyone wants ASL interpretation to ask a question, please let us know by sending a message to the chat or the Q&A. One final logistic, after the webinar, a survey about your experience will open automatically. We want to know how we did, what we could do better next time, and what issues you are interested in hearing about in the future webinars. And if for some reason you get disconnected before the end of the webinar, you can use the same link to rejoin us. All right, let's get to know our panelists. First, I am proud to welcome Iden Campbell, the Racial Justice and Trans Justice Program Director at Basic Rights Oregon. Iden, will you introduce yourself? And Iden, you're on mute. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me tonight, Kelly. So I'm the Racial Justice and Transgender Justice Program Director at Basic Rights Oregon, and I'm happy to be here tonight. Yeah.
Thanks, Iden. We're so happy to have you with us here today. And Basic Rights Oregon, Oregon statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization, is a longtime partner of the ACLU of Oregon. So it's very fitting that we're teaming up again today. Thanks for being here, Iden. Next, I am excited to welcome Moof Mayeda. Moof, will you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name's Moof. I go by they, them pronouns. Before becoming a software engineer, which is my current job, I spent 11 years at the National LGBTQ Task Force, where I traveled all around the country helping communities organize winning campaigns on LGBT justice issues and racial and gender justice. I've been a consistent advocate for centering the leadership of the most marginalized folks since my early days of trans activism. I was named to the Trans 100 in 2014. Currently, my movement home is Asians for Black Lives Portland, which I helped restart in 2015. And when I'm not working or parenting my kid, I like to go on long runs and watch bad TV with my partner and friends.
Thank you, Moof. Moof shared their experience in a friend of the court brief with ACLU of Oregon and Basic Rights Oregon on behalf of Jones Hollister's fight to get a non-binary gender marker in Lane County Court. A judge there denied Jones and has denied other non-binary people, even though Oregon law is in place to protect non-binary people's rights. Jones Hollister is currently awaiting an opinion in their case at the Oregon Court of Appeals, so we wish them luck. And last but certainly not least, I want to welcome a former client of ours, Tyler Warner. Tyler, will you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Tyler Warner. I use he, him pronouns. I am a transgender activist and 2020 graduate of Sutherland High School. When I was a junior, I was singled out and targeted with a mean and meritless lawsuit by the so-called Parents for Privacy. But I fought back for my rights and the rights of all other trans students in Oregon to use school bathrooms and locker rooms most consistent with their gender identities.
Thank you, Tyler. The lawsuit that Tyler fought in Sutherland was actually a copycat of another cruel lawsuit from Parents for Privacy in Dallas, Oregon. that sought to do away with important protections for LGBTQ students in Oregon schools. The ACLU has defeated Parents for Privacy in the District Court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, partnering with Basic Rights Oregon again in that case, and the group is now seeking review in the Supreme Court. So we will be sure to let you know whether the court takes that case. Again, thank you everyone who has joined us tonight. I'm thrilled to announce that we have, let me look if I can see the participants. I would love to announce the number. 81 participants tuned into the webinar so far, and it looks like the number is still rising. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. Over 50 years ago, Black and brown trans women fought back against police brutality and discrimination that too many LGBTQ people still face. And Black Americans worked to see key civil rights protections put into federal law. The Civil Rights Act was the foundation of the recent Supreme Court win for LGBTQ people. This term, the court heard 3 employment discrimination cases, 2 from ACLU clients, Amy Stevens, who was fired for being transgender, and Don Zarda, who was fired for being gay. Gerald Bostock, who was also fired for being gay, brought the 3rd case. And I'm happy to say that last week, the Supreme Court has strongly affirmed that employers cannot fire or otherwise discriminate against LGBTQ people in the workplace because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. The court's decision sets a key precedent to further affirming legal protections in education, housing, credit, and healthcare, areas where too many LGBTQ people, particularly Black and brown LGBTQ people, experience significant discrimination. And the court's rationale directly contradicted the Trump administration's cruel attempt to take away healthcare for the trans community. Okay, so that's kind of a gross oversimplification of the moment we find ourselves in today in terms of LGBTQ rights. Moof, you have a lot of thoughts on the current state of the movement and the recent Supreme Court decisions. Let's start with you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the recent Supreme Court victory it's both an indicator of and a driving force for broader cultural acceptance of transgender people, which is great. But for those in our community who are really struggling to survive all kinds of violence, interpersonal violence, institutional violence, as well as state violence, it can be a largely symbolic victory. So that's why, we need to center the leadership of Black trans women who are clearly defining priorities like these for the broader movement. And so now you can see, I think you can all see a slide that is from the Transgender Law Center's website. You can learn more about each one of those demands by clicking the link that I think is also being added to the chat right now.
Thanks, Moof. Iden, I know you've been thinking about this as well. What are your thoughts on the recent victory? We might be having technical difficulties with Iden. Okay, I'm gonna bump ahead while Iden sorts that out. As we've heard some from Moof, formal law change doesn't create justice alone, but even our formal law still has critical gaps, including our federal non-discrimination laws. Christina, can you pull up the action slide? I'm gonna move us forward. Awesome, thanks. So we need Congress to protect all LGBTQ people from discrimination in public accommodations, federally funded programs, and more. And that's why we're calling on Congress to pass the Equality Act, and we need your help. The link for this action is on the screen here, and we'll share it in the chat as well. Your messages to Congress are so, so powerful as their constituents. So please send our electeds a message and share this action with your networks. And thank you for those who maybe already have if you've seen this link before. We are grateful for another step in the bending of the arc of justice, and we will continue to fight. Like Iden and Moof said, have said to me and said here tonight, changing the law is just one step in building a fair and just society, but we have so much more work to do. Moof, I know you've thought also about what is kind of needed beyond formal legal change. Can you share some of your thoughts with us about that?
Yeah, you know, when I worked at the National LGBTQ Task Force, I traveled all around the country to organize for local and statewide non-discrimination laws. And, you know, the idea of being fired or discriminated against just for being who you are, I think really upsets people. And I think because in their minds, you know, they think if it weren't for this one kind of discrimination, you know, gender identity or sexual orientation, then we'd have equality. But the truth is that many of us already know that the whole system itself is broken, that we don't live in a meritocracy. And so passing more and more laws that protect us from discrimination aren't going to actually get us the transformational change that we know we need. We won't get there without also changing our own movements, which have historically been cis and white dominated. When organizations often take their first steps towards becoming more inclusive, I've seen them often lift up the voices and leadership of individuals at the margins, but they keep all the power to themselves. You know, I think some people ask then, well, how do you transform historically white or cis or straight-led organizations? And, you know, I think the truth is, if any of us had a successful model for that, I think we would have more answers about how to make our broader communities more equitable too. I think we need to invest more time and energy and money in supporting the work and leadership of Black and Brown trans people and divest in white-led efforts.
Thanks, Moof. I'm going to check back in with Iden to see if, Iden, are you able to connect yet? I just want to check in with you because I would love for folks to hear your thoughts. All right. I'll circle back one more time in the future, but thank you, Moof, for sharing those thoughts. And some of those reflections are things the ACLU of Oregon is struggling with now as a historically and presently white and cis-dominated organization. So we also need to change how we do that. All right, I'm going to pivot now to another dynamic in LGBTQ movements. A lot of times those of us who live in cities have really different experiences than rural LGBTQ Oregonians. So Tyler, when you were a junior, you were singled out and targeted with a mean-spirited, meritless, all the negative words we want to throw in there, lawsuit by this group, the so-called Parents for Privacy. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, I was definitely bullied a lot at school and told that I was weird or different. They called me a lot of names that I'm not going to repeat here, but feeling unaccepted and like an outcast can really put a toll on you emotionally. And over time, I became more secluded and more isolated, but I knew my rights at school, so I didn't intend on backing down from that. Then one day, during the summer before my junior year of high school, my mom called me over to see an article that she was reading on her phone. And I learned through the local news that I was personally named in a lawsuit because I used the boys' bathroom at my school, and that made one of my male peers feel uncomfortable. Parents for Privacy eventually dropped the lawsuit against my school after the ACLU and Basic Rights Oregon won in court in a similar case, but Parents for Privacy keeps appealing that decision. So I've continued to speak out with the ACLU. I want other transgender students in Oregon to know that they're not alone. I hope that other students like me feel empowered enough to speak up about the issues in their district, whether it be about privacy or bullying or anything in between, no matter where they live.
Thanks for sharing that, Tyler. Iden, can you hear us at least? Are you connected there?
Okay.
Awesome. So
All right.
Iden,
All right.
Iden, I know you've thought some about the difference between kind of formal law change and folks' lived experience. Do you have thoughts you would want to share around that?
Yeah. So, I've been thinking a lot recently about the shifts we're in and the civil unrest, and especially how the LGBTQ movement can move forward as far as bringing more BIPOC voice to leadership positions. And also ensuring that trans women, especially Black and Indigenous trans women voices are heard in these organizations, their leaderships, their leadership abilities are allowed to move forward. It's just really important that the LGBT community finally realize that the way that we've been doing things since Stonewall happened has been basically to silence the voices of Black trans women, especially the BIPOC community as a whole. And so bringing in these voices in the organizations and not just saying we're bringing people in to shift power in organizations, but how can we bring people in and actually, instead of saying we're shifting power and giving people power, how can we bring people into these organizations and not make them gatekeepers to their own communities? And look more at restorative justice, restoring the justice to these communities that actually created the movement to help us see the rights that we have today, and not forget about those people. Because basically that's what the LGBT community has done. We've essentially silenced those voices and forgotten about the group of people that actually got us to where we are today.
Yeah, thank you for that. And kind of, I have one more question for you, building off of what Tyler shared. Can you talk a little bit about work that BRO has done for LGBTQ youth, and especially around Addie's Act?
Yeah. So Addie's Act was signed into law last year in June. As a matter of fact, it was, I think, my second week at BRO. The governor signed it into law last year. Addie's Act was named after a young trans girl, Addie Staub, who died by suicide a few years ago after she came out as being a trans woman. So Addie's dad asked BRO to help them find a way to ensure that Addie memory would not only last, but that Addie did not die in vain. And so basically Addie's Act was created to ensure that all districts in Oregon have suicide model plans. And so the fall year of 2020, when students do go back to school, each school district should have a model plan in place by then, so that all students and even the people that work in the schools, from the school teachers down to the janitorial services, have been trained in suicide prevention. And so if any student has suicidal thinking or is thinking about self-harm, they can go to anyone in that school that they feel comfortable talking to and receive support to keep them from harming themselves, and also community resources. So yeah, look for that in the fall of 2020 to roll out in all school districts.
Great, thanks, Iden. Thank you, Moof. Thank you, Tyler. I now want to invite in a new guest, River McKenzie. River is on the board of Transponder, and they're here to tell us about their work and how our audience can get involved. River, are you with us? I think I see you.
Yes, I'm here.
Right, welcome, River.
Thank you. Well, yeah, so I'm on the board of Transponder. We're in Eugene, Oregon, and we are a nonprofit that is led by and for trans and gender diverse folks. We have monthly support groups, and we just recently added a T-BIPOC support group only led for and by TPOC people. Excuse me, let me get this water. We've also got a lot of weekly events, and even during COVID, we have them. So they're online and they happen weekly. We organize educational and cultural events and provide trainings to all of the local sheriff's offices and other nonprofits, other social justice places, businesses, anything from policy to procedure and more. We're on panels. And recently, during COVID, we put out a needs assessment. And what rose from that is that folks needed mental health and they needed social connections. So we've increased our events online, we've increased our social media presence, and we've been partnering with HIV Alliance so folks can get hormones and syringes delivered to their homes, and case management, OHP enrollment, mental health, and we've also been working within our organization on some of these topics that we're talking about right now. So increasing our racial justice work, both within and without our organization.
Thanks, River. I encourage everyone to get involved and support Transponder, and appreciate you all joining us tonight. All right, we will now take some questions from the audience. As a reminder to do so, type your question into the Q&A box and not the chat box. And again, the Q&A box is the box with the letter Q on it. If anyone wants ASL interpretation as well to ask a question, please let us know. You can send a message to the panelists in the chat or the Q&A feature, and just let us know you want that. All right. First question is about Addie's Law. So we have someone on from Colorado, it looks like, and the person's wondering, do other states have laws like Addie's Law?
Yeah, several other states, including California, which is the state that Addie's Act was built upon. So California, DC, Massachusetts are just a few of the states that have a law similar to Addie's Act.
Great, thanks, Iden. All right, Tyler, what advice do you have for cisgender students and teachers who want to be supportive of trans and gender non-conforming students? Or maybe what felt supportive to you as you were going through the experience at school, or are still navigating the school environment?
Definitely for me, just having somebody that is willing to listen to you, whether that be a teacher or a counselor, is really nice to have. If somebody is telling you that they would like to use different pronouns, or that they have different preferred pronouns, then please use them. They're very important for just personal comfort in general. And being able to actually change my name in the school system so that the teachers know what name to use for me is definitely helpful as well. So if you can use it as a nickname, maybe just making sure all teachers are aware and are using your correct pronouns and name can really help.
Cool, thanks for sharing that, Tyler, and being willing to talk more about your experience. For folks who have been involved in campaigns and movement and legal work, and building coalitions, organizing folks, what do you think the LGBTQ movement should be focused on next? I know we saw the slide that Moof put up earlier with some ideas and demands, and really Moof mentioned centering the demands of Black trans leaders and the Black trans community. But do folks have other thoughts on where we think the movement should go next? Or is going next?
Yeah, I would like to see movement towards economic justice for transgender people, helping trans people move into, housing that's supportive for them, and also ensuring that our leadership skills are being utilized to the fullest in organizations and in community organizing work. But definitely economic justice should be high on our priority list.
Moof or Tyler, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think echoing what Iden said, I would really encourage folks, especially as they're setting agendas for their organizations, their grassroots groups at home, to take a look at that broader list. I think it really does go beyond what we've seen the LGBT movement prioritize in the past. It really expands the idea of the kinds of violence that especially Black and brown trans women are facing, to include, state violence as well. That means abolishing the prison industrial complex. It means, and like we talked about earlier in this conversation, really following the leadership of Black and brown trans women rather than kind of keeping their voices to the side. Yeah, that's what I'd add.
Thanks, Moof. So our panelists have a lot of experience in different contexts. We have Tyler, who's in school. We have Iden, who's in a nonprofit, and Moof, who's kind of in the corporate world. Though I know you all have come from a number of other contexts prior to where you are today. What have you all seen in terms of institutional work that has helped shift culture or build a more inclusive culture and lift up the leadership of Black trans folks that may be in an organization?
So for me, I've actually, whatever movement I've seen, when people say they want to move Black and brown voices into the culture of organizations, I've seen trauma and hurt for those communities, because it's always coming from a place of where whiteness is centered, and how can we make ourselves feel better, instead of really how can we listen to the voices of the people that actually know what they want. And so in order for us to be able to move forward as a community, as a movement, white people actually have stopped talking and trying to create new programming, and let Black and brown voices actually create those programmings. We know what we want, we know what works. Let us do it. Just move out of the way.
Moof or Tyler, any other thoughts there? All right, Moof, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You mentioned you were part of Asians for Black Lives. Can you tell us more about that group?
Sure, yeah, like I mentioned, I was part of restarting it in 2015. It's a grassroots collective-based group. People kind of move in and out as they're able to, trying to do a mix of education work and solidarity work. The education is, sort of for ourselves and for our broader Asian American communities in Portland, talking about anti-Blackness, and also talking about the history of relationships between Black and Asian communities, both in Portland and beyond that. And then we also do a lot of solidarity work following the leadership of Black-led groups here in Portland, with groups like Don't Shoot and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And also the Keaton Notice visuals is something that we regularly participate in.
Awesome, thanks, Moof. River, are you still connected with us? We have, awesome. We have a question about transponder. Is transponder mostly in Eugene or is it statewide? And if it's not statewide, what do you know is available in other parts of Oregon, assuming not Portland, not Eugene?
Yeah, so we are in Eugene and we have done some statewide work. I know that there's another group in Corvallis that recently just got going, and we helped for a little while to get going. If folks are looking for, it would depend on what you're looking for, but what I would say is reach out to us. On the slide, we've got contact information, but info@Transponder Community. You could ask what you're looking for, and we're usually pretty good at helping find local resources. There we go.
Thanks, River. Tyler, Iden, do either of you have thoughts on, or Moof if you know as well, thoughts on other organizations you would encourage folks to look into outside of the Portland, Eugene area?
Yeah, you have the Trans People of Color Coalition that was founded by Kyla Brodus. Kyla is, I think, currently in New York City. You have Trans Women of Color Collective, which was founded by Loris Ashley Hunter in DC. You have Casa Ruby, which was founded by Ruby Corrado in DC. You have DC Trans Pride and May Is, which was founded by Savannah Wanzer. You have Utopia PDX and Utopia Seattle. They're not Black ran trans organizations, but they support Black trans people. So I would definitely, add them to the list as strong allies, located both here in Portland and in Seattle. And also you have Awkward, which is a trans talent agency that was founded by Jay Mace III. Jay Mace is currently in Seattle. Amazing group of artists that are all around the country. That includes Dana Dede, who is my actual favorite trans artist ever of all time. So yeah, those are just a few organizations.
Thanks, Iden.
Oh, one more we cannot forget. The Marsha P. Johnson Institute, which was founded by L. Hearns a couple of years ago. And so we all know who Marsha P. Johnson is. And definitely that is an organization that we all should support as well.
Yeah, thanks, Iden. All right, I'm gonna shift us to a place that may make us all nervous, but in the upcoming election, what kinds of specific questions should we be asking of people running for office at local and state levels as we ramp up to November?
Moof is paying me back for being absent, missing in action the first half. For me, does this candidate believe in reparations for Black people, and also the government finally being behind 100% the promises that we made to Native Americans, defunding police departments and moving that money into Black communities. Also, basically creating something different from the current criminal justice system that we have. We have more people incarcerated in this country than any other country in the world. And so how can we change that? How can we dismantle that system, which is basically the modern day chattel slavery system? So that's just a few things that I would want to know from local and national candidates.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would just add healthcare. You know, it's so important for everybody, but especially for trans folks. And you know, having to deal with not only trans exclusions or potentially like religious exemptions, all the hurdles that we face as trans people. But you shouldn't have to have a job to have healthcare. I mean, you know, we should be able to have universal healthcare. I think that would make a huge difference for trans folks and all of our communities.
Tyler, are you jumping in here?
I was just trying to think a little bit. I guess for school, I would just want to know like if they could, sorry, brain fog. Just having more LGBTQ inclusive learning at school. Like in history and sex ed and health class in general.
Yeah,
it would be really important.
Awesome. All right, now to the theme of the night, Pride. How do you all normally celebrate Pride, and how are you being impacted in that by the current pandemic? I know for me, I'm a classic lesbian. I'm just like, I'm at home and I'm at home, so.
I mean, I've been hitting the streets on the regular. I think that's a great way to honor our transcestors and the spirit of pride and revolution. You know, I personally, I also Pride is usually in Portland. It was this past weekend. It was also Father's Day, so I got to celebrate International Moof Day with my friends and family and my kid, which was really sweet and tender. I guess I don't know. I guess the only thing I would just bring up around Pride is, as a lot of cities are trying to figure out how to recognize Pride season, Pride month, Pride parades, all that kind of stuff, that, you know, it just makes me think back to how participating in like no police at Pride kind of disruptions was controversial in the last few years. And I'm glad to see that that's a less controversial thing, and that our communities are really demanding that police stay out of Pride. So I'm glad to see the progress in that area.
Iden or Tyler, want to share your Pride thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people that I'm not ashamed to say that I've never celebrated Pride. It's so commercialized and it's moved so far away from what it should be, at least I think so. So it's not something that I've celebrated on a personal level. But of course, now that I'm working at Basic Rights Oregon, you know, we do a lot of work with Pride. And so I am, you know, happy to join my organization in those celebrations, but no personal celebrations.
I'd say for me, I've gone to Pride in Portland a couple times, and we also in recent years have had Pride marches, and last year we actually had our first Pride parade in the entire county that I live in. Yeah, it was our first sanctioned Pride parade in Douglas County. I got to meet hundreds of members of my community that are just proud to be who they are, or they're just there to show their support. And I also got to hold the leading banner with my girlfriend and lead the parade. Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler. All right, this one is more of a legal question, so I may take a crack at it first. Is there an update on medical care for transgender people in prison? So it sounds like the person asking this question is aware of the lawsuit that we filed a few years ago on behalf of a trans woman who was incarcerated in male facilities and was being denied access to hormone therapy as she was requesting. I'm happy to update that I've not heard recently any complaints or interruptions in access to medical care for folks who are incarcerated, for trans folks who are incarcerated. We still continue to hear some complaints, well, not some, but mental health care. There's I think a long way to go in improving mental health care for all people who are incarcerated, but especially for trans people who are incarcerated and Black trans women who are incarcerated. We also are continuing to advocate for housing consistent with where people feel safe. And a lot of trans women are still being housed in male facilities, male dorm facilities. There's still women being housed in Snake River on the eastern border. It's the largest male facility in the state. So there's still a lot of work to do in our prisons, including shrinking them. I don't think the ACLU's official position is to abolish them, but that is an option to be discussed as well. Iden, do you have other thoughts? I know Bro's been engaged with people who are incarcerated as well. Do you have other thoughts to add there?
Yeah, we've actually had a tour last year at one of the prisons, and we met with some of the people that were housed at that prison. We met with some trans women and some trans men to talk about their health care, being able to receive affirming surgeries and other therapies. And I do know that a lot of complaints have gone down. There are still a lot of the things that you mentioned, especially around mental health care. So I know that as I start working deeper with the Department of Corrections, along with other BRO staff, hopefully we'll be able to change those things, and we'll be able to make sure that more trans women that want to be transferred to women-only facilities are able to do that, and that the mental health care will get a lot better as well.
Thanks, Iden. All right. What gives everyone hope for the future? While everyone thinks, I'll offer my thoughts. Since I've put you all on the spot all night, I feel like it's fair to offer here. I think for me, it's meeting young people. I have been getting to know one young trans girl, and just the resiliency, the vision of the world, that is one that I just have not heard from people my age. It's just so expansive, and to know that there are people who think, who are coming into the world with creativity and expansion, that really excites me, because I know that we have just such a deep need in our country and in the world to reimagine the world that we live in. And so when I see the imagination of young people, I just get really excited. Others, thoughts on things that give you hope?
I was also going to call on kind of queer and trans imagination. I think it takes a lot of courage and vision to be able to come out and live the lives that we want and build our communities and kind of our networks in a way that I think the broader society doesn't have words for even sometimes, or have a paradigm for, and we manage to do it. You know, we build things from nothing in a brand new way. And I think that that kind of spirit of imagination and is the thing that will continue to guide us to create and transform our society in a way that will really take care of us, you know, and kind of nurture us in all the ways that we're missing right now.
In January, I went to a celebration of life for Nikki Kuhnhausen, the young trans girl who was murdered last year, and her body was found in December. And some of Nikki friends came up to speak about Nikki and the life that she lived and how much they loved her. And I was just sitting there looking at them, and you know, I was realizing that these were young girls that were still in high school or had just graduated from high school, and also some of them were Nikki's sisters too. And I was just thinking about how all of my trans women friends that I know talk about cis women never being their allies or never having their backs. But that whole picture changed as I was listening to these young girls talk about Nikki and how much they loved her and how Nikki was the best dressed one of them and how Nikki knew how to fix her makeup much better than they could. And I was just looking and listening at them, and I was thinking, this is the future. These are the trans women that will change what trans women today are talking about, right? These are the new allies and, you know, the people that will have their backs. So that's my hope, is that more young girls will start speaking out about violence against trans women and, you know, standing up for them and being there for them when they need to be.
Thanks, Iden. All right, I see a question about school. The question is, what thoughts and suggestions can you share with us to assist in creating a more equitable and less damaging school experience? And there's some more information. And I'll just take the opportunity here to say, if you feel that your rights are being violated at school, please reach out to us at ACLU of Oregon. You can email intake@aclu-or.org. Again, that's intake@aclu-or.org. All right. I think that is all of the questions we're going to have time for today. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you again to the panelists. Before we close out the evening, I want to welcome my colleague, Yvonne Garcia, to say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kelly, Iden, Moof, Tyler, and River. I'm Yvonne Garcia with the ACLU of Oregon, and I use she, her pronouns. So the ACLU has fought long and hard for the rights of the LGBT community, and we want to thank all of our brave clients who stood up to fight for their rights and for the rights of others. We talked about some recent wins, but as you heard, there is still a lot of work to do to make sure we create inclusive spaces for all LGBTQ folks, and still more work to do in centering the voices of Black and Brown folks in particular. So I'm sure some of you are asking what you can do to help us continue this critical work. Would you consider becoming a monthly sustaining donor for the ACLU? Giving at least $10 a month, and of course, we're always happy to accept more, sends the message to our LGBTQ friends, neighbors, colleagues, and family members that we will continue this fight with and for them. So jump into the chat, give us your name and email to our team member, Unique, and let us know you are willing to stand with us to protect and to expand LGBTQ rights. Just last week, we all watched in horror as the president attempted to roll back transgender folks' rights. And a week later, your ACLU was at the Supreme Court to fight that fight. Please give generously and stand with us in the fights to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne, and thank you, Honey, that cute, adorable dog that made a fantastic cameo. We are going to conclude tonight with a video. Sadly, it is not a video of Honey, but it's a really important video to the ACLU community. Before we pull that video up, I want to thank you again, Moof and Iden and Tyler and River, for sharing your expertise with us tonight. And thank you to everyone at Transponder and Basic Rights Oregon and Asians for Black Lives for the work you all are doing. I also want to thank one more time L'Oreal Aviles and Brandon Heaps for interpreting for our audience tonight, and Heather Rutler from LNS Captioning for captioning tonight. And thank you, last but not least, audience, for joining us this evening. The webinar has been recorded, so if you want to rewatch it or share it with your friends, you will be able to find the recording on our website and social media shortly after this evening. All right, the video we want to send you all away with tonight is a video tribute to Amy Stevens, one of our clients in the Supreme Court cases for LGBTQ employment protections. We mourn the fact that neither Amy, who just died in May, nor Dawn Zarda, who died in 2014, lived to see these important victories that their struggles paved the way for. Before Amy died, she was able to see the video we are sharing with you, where celebrities and advocates read from the heartfelt letter that she wrote to her employers to let them know she was trans. Sadly, her employers fired her, but as you know, she bravely fought all the way to the Supreme Court, which ruled in her favor last week. One of Amy's last wishes was to see the fight to end discrimination continue, and we thank her for being a trailblazer and a hero. Before that starts, I'd like to wish you all well, and thank you for sticking with us tonight.
Dear friends and coworkers.
Dear friends and coworkers.
Dear friends and coworkers, I have known many of you for some time now, and I count you all as friends.
What I must tell you is very difficult for me and is taking all the courage I can muster.
I'm writing this both to inform you of a significant change in my life
and to ask for your patience, understanding, and support,
which I would treasure greatly.
Which I would treasure greatly.
Which I would treasure greatly.
I have a gender identity disorder that I have struggled with my entire life.
I've been in therapy for nearly 4 years now and have been diagnosed as a transsexual.
I have felt imprisoned in a body that does not match my mind.
That does not match my mind.
That does not match my mind.
And this has caused me great despair and loneliness.
With the support of my loving wife, I have decided to become the person that my mind already is.
And that my mind already is.
That my mind already is.
At the end of my vacation on August 26th, 2013,
I will return to work as my true self. Amy
Australia's
Stevens.
In appropriate business attire. I realize that some of you may have trouble understanding this.
In truth, I've had to live with it every day of my life, and even I do not fully understand it myself.
I have tried hard all my life to please everyone around me, to do the right thing, not rock the boat.
As distressing as this is sure to be for my friends and some of my family, I need to do this for myself.
I need to do this for myself.
I need to do this for myself and for my own peace of mind.
And for my own peace of mind.
And for my own peace of mind. And to end the agony in my soul.
I have learned that life is an adventure and would like to believe that the best is yet to come.
That the best is yet to come.
That the best is yet to come.
I hope we can enjoy it together.
It is my wish that I can continue my work at RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes, doing what I've always done, which is my best.
Which is my best.
Which is my best.
Which is my best.
Which is my best.